Hello, and welcome to Outnumbered the podcast. I'm Bonnie.
And I'm Audrey, and we're homeschooling moms to a combined total of 18 children.
We know firsthand that motherhood is full of crazy chaos and overwhelming obligations, but it should also be full of love and laughter.
Regardless of where you are on your journey, come join us as we work together to find joy in the chaos of motherhood. Hello, and welcome to episode 38. Today, we're going to be talking about something that you guys have been asking us to talk about for a long time, sibling rivalry.
Dun, dun, dun.
Because we've got it all figured
in other
out,
words,
right?
Fighting. Yeah, good times.
Okay, so we're going to start with a review. This one is left by Kay from Canada. It says, a surprising little gem. I stumbled across your podcast earlier this spring, and while I haven't listened to all of the episodes, I have loved what I've heard. You work together so seamlessly and have such great advice. Thank you for the time you put into creating this insightful podcast. Oh, can I put in a request for a topic? Please give me some advice on navigating teenagers, especially hormonal and emotional girls. I'm drowning here, ladies.
Amen, sister.
I have some girl teenagers, so I suppose I could relate. I don't know if I could.
Yeah, let's have you tell us all the tips. Yeah,
we'll work
good
on
idea.
that.
Yeah, I'll talk about boys. You can talk about girls. You got both, but that's all I got to offer. Okay, so for a humor segment today, because we're talking about sibling rivalry, fights between kids, we thought that we would both share the most desperate thing we've done to stop our kids from fighting. So mine, I'm sure there's been something more desperate, but I wanted to share one thing that happened recently. I've been struggling to really focus on the good in my kids and not always be correcting their bad behavior, just focusing on the things they do right. So my 6-year-old, this is especially difficult with because he is an instigator. He fights with literally every child in the house, from the 14-year-old to the 2-year-old, not the baby. He doesn't fight with the baby. So I've been trying to focus on the good. So the other day, the kids were playing with like kitchen utensils, like spatulas, and, for swords or whatever, and pot lids for shields. And so, of course, as they're playing, somebody gets whacked in the head with a spatula and somebody whacks somebody back. And my 6-year-old is really angry at this point. And so he lifts up his spatula and chucks it at the sibling. And my first reaction is to yell, "No, don't do that." And then I see him lift up the shield. Well, this is like a metal pot lid, right? That's really going to do some damage either to my wall or to a kid's face. And so I immediately went into my finding good face, voice. "Oh, let's please not do that, buddy." This is totally out of character for me. I'm usually screaming when kids are fighting. "Oh, let's not do that, bud. We don't want to hurt her." Or I think I said, "We don't want to damage property," or something like that. Cause I think he really did want to hurt her at that moment. And then he dropped it. And I immediately stayed in that mentality and was like, "Thank you so much for dropping that and not throwing it." Again, totally out of character for me. I'm usually like, "All right, let's focus on what you did wrong." But if you could have seen the look on his face, it was pure shock. Wow, she just thanked me for not chucking a metal pot lid at my sister's head. But I was like, I'm calling that a win.
Oh, yeah. All right. So my funniest or maybe most desperate thing I've done to get my kids to stop fighting is, so when my oldest two were at the age where they just can't seem to get along. And I know that, at least with my kids, there's been an age where they reach and there's two of them, they just butt heads over everything. It doesn't matter what. So I was just desperate. I didn't have any idea what to do. So I decided I'd tried everything I could think of. So I said, "All right, go get me a piece of yarn." And they went and got me a ball of yarn, and I tied a string around one end of, so I tied one end of the yarn around one of their wrist, and I tied the other end of the yarn around the other end of the wrist and gave them about 2 feet in between. And I said, "Okay, you guys are now stuck together until you learn how to get along." And I tied them together, and then I sent him out to clean the chicken house like that.
Now go scoop, poop.
So,
you're going to like each other.
So then, that it's kind of desperate, but it does throw them into us against mom mentality. So they're not, each other is not the bad guy anymore. Kind of mom's the bad guy. Right. And come on, it's yarn. It doesn't hurt, right? So So they conspired with each other. And while they were in the chicken house scooping poop, apparently they removed the yarn, and pulled one over on mom's side. But they came back in and they were buddies. And, that was really about some of the last times that they got into it together, because I would just kind of have to say, okay, yarn time. And, that was, no, mom, we love each other. Kiss, kiss, hug, hug.
Yeah, there is some, and we're going to talk more about this later, but there's something to be said about pitting them against a parent that actually helps them get along better.
Those two now get along better than I've seen any siblings ever get along. So I'm claiming the yarn trick did it, but it might have been, just whatever.
Just a united front against a common enemy. That's you.
And hopefully the desperation that they didn't want to get tied together again or something.
Mm-hmm. I've always thought about throwing fighting kids in the shower together and turning it on. You heard of that? I've heard of somebody doing that for teenage boys, because my boys are now big enough to fight so hard that I don't want to insert myself in there, but I also can't let them keep doing it. They're going to really hurt each other. So I'm like, maybe the hose? I don't know. Turn the hose on.
Oh, all right. So today we're going to talk all about sibling rivalry, when kids will fight. And we've got lots of experience with this. If nothing else, we can relate to people asking for help with sibling rivalry.
Yeah, totally. We are going to talk about why we want our kids to get along. That seems fairly obvious, but I think there's quite a few different reasons and different ways to look at it.
Okay, we're going to give our best tips for helping them get along. And I promise they're going to be better than tie them together with string.
Although that is an excellent one I'm keeping in my back pocket. We're also going to talk about what to do when they do not get along. So when there is fighting or rivalry or, and when we say rivalry, we tend to mean something a little bit longer lasting than just like a fight here and there, right? Something that is hard to overcome. So we're going to talk about what to do when that happens.
So why do we want our kids to get along? Kind of obvious, for peace and quiet here and now, right? Just to make the noise stop and to not have to always be the referee. But also we want our kids to get along because we have a vision for a future clan that starts with these kids. And if they can't stand each other because of how much they fought when they were kids and how much they didn't get along, and if they have lasting resentment, they're just not going to want to be around each other. And that's not the vision we have for our family going forward into the future.
Yeah, I love that you use the word vision. So we have had various mission statements over the years for our family. We recently redid ours. But I love the idea of teaching it to your children as a vision. So like envision us in 20 years. And it's kind of fun for kids to be like, wow, in 20 years, I'm going to be 30. In 20 years, I'm going to be 28, and say, what do you think your life is going to look like? Talk about that a little bit. What do you want our family to look like? Well, you're not going to live here anymore. You probably live with your own family. When you come to visit on Sunday, what will that look like? And to really get them envisioning their future and how their siblings and parents play into that. And that can really, really be beneficial to their relationships today when they realize that they don't want to be fighting over petty things when they're 25 years old.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we tell our kids, do you want to be friends when you grow up? And that starts now. That's something I say to my kids a lot.
And I think that is one of the biggest side blessings of homeschooling is just more time together. Sometimes quality time, sometimes just quantity time, but it's easier to develop a relationship when you have more time together. But our reasons are similar to yours. We want peace at home, obviously. I feel like everything goes more smoothly when there's no fighting. We want lifelong relationships, and we want to set them up for also to have good non-familial relationships. So I feel like people who can overcome obstacles in their family relationships are just that much easier to get along with outside of the family. Does that make sense? So they're going to be a lot better roommates, a lot better spouses if they understand how to overcome sibling squabbles.
Yeah, exactly. I think I've mentioned this before. My husband grew up in a family that squabbled a lot or had a lot of discussions that got
heated
compared to my family growing up. Yeah, they got quite heated, and sometimes people would argue the other side of the equation just so there could be some life in the conversation or something. Yeah. And when I first came around this, I didn't know how to, I didn't know this kind of lively discussion or debate or it just seemed like fighting to me, and I didn't know how to interact in a way like that. So to be able to have a relationship outside of your family, like your family is, we've said this before too, is like the safe place to, in our temper tantrum episode, the safe place to express your feelings and your disappointments. And so the safe place to learn how to get along with people too, right?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so now we're going to share some tips with how to head off that sibling rivalry, those fights, the competition before it starts. So my best and favorite tip is to start before the sibling ever arrives. We talked a lot about this in episode 5 on getting kids ready for a new sibling. And in that episode, I specifically went through what we do to get our kids ready for a new sibling, because there is so many books out there and so much thought out there that you're not going to be the baby anymore. And that does introduce rivalry or competition into a relationship.
Yeah, almost from the get-go, you're saying, oh, you're less special now. Sorry. Nobody wants to feel that way.
Yeah. So start before the sibling even arrives and talk about how they're going to love each other and how they're going to be friends, and that, along that line. Another thing we do is we discourage competition. I know that we are homeschooled, so we don't have as much opportunity for this, but we don't put our kids in competitive sports. Not because they couldn't do it or they wouldn't love it or there's not good things to be learned, but it's just part of our philosophy that we just don't encourage competition in our kids. We discourage competition. And then we encourage friendships. So like I said a second ago, we talk about, do you guys want to be friends when you grow up? Do you want to do stuff together? Imagine yourself shopping together or getting your families together for a barbecue or something. And how we do this is we have them do tasks together. So yes, I had my kids clean the chicken house together, tied together and all that. But I'll put 2 kids on one chore for the week. Okay, you guys are going to, taking care of the goats this week. And that's your job together, and help each other, and then give them rewards together too. So for example, you guys were on goats this week and you did so awesome. We're going to run to town and we're going to, do a special activity or go to a park because you guys did such a great job taking care of the goats. And so they get, those 2 that were working together get rewarded together. And that's another way to encourage friendships. Another one that's maybe a little bit of a toughie for adults is be friends with your own siblings. So yeah, maybe you had some sibling rivalry or competition or hard feelings, resentment from growing up, but we're adults now. And so if that can be resolved and if we can be friends or work toward friendships with our own siblings, to be an example of our kids, what they might want to do someday, that's golden. Might be difficult, but it is like being the example of what we want our kids to be, right? And then one thing I have my kids do, so if oftentimes there's 2 that they're just butting heads and they just are, no matter what, they're setting each other off. So, if they come to me and they're constantly tattling on one sibling, I always ask them to tell me one good thing about their sibling, the sibling that they're struggling with, before they tell me whatever thing they came to tell.
That's good.
So, so-and-so was hitting me or whatever. So I said, stop. You have to tell me something good about them before you tell me the bad thing.
I'm doing that. That's awesome.
And they kind of stop and blink and think. And then they're like, because they really want to tell that bad thing. So they have to, but they're not allowed until they think of something
thinking about
good.
the good thing might take a little bit of the wind out of their hate sails, I guess I do kind of like them, but I'm still mad they hit me. So that actually reminds me of one of our tips, what we do at the dinner table every night is we tell our highs and lows for the days. We say my high was going to the store and using my money to buy a toy. My low was when I tripped and fell at the park or whatever. But some caveats of this are your low can't be tattling. So it can't be, my low was when my brother hit me. You can say getting hurt or something like that. But, and so it doesn't become like just a tattle fest, but also it really helps others the other siblings encourage the one who's telling it, like, oh, you're high. Yeah, that was so awesome that you did that. Good job. And we all kind of, the parents are the example of encouraging the kid in that, or showing empathy when they talk about their low. Wow, that must have been really hard. I'm sorry that happened to you today. And empathy is so, so important. It's something that I think many adults don't know how to practice. I still work on sometimes, but to teach your kid true empathy, out of a totally selfless place is really, really powerful. And along with that, I realize how important it is to teach our kids moral absolutes, like right and wrong. Like, it is always wrong to hit your sibling. I don't care what they did to you. It is always wrong to, whatever else your rules are. Because then it becomes not a us versus them thing where mom's nagging me again. It's I just made a serious mistake because that is, and that goes to, into spiritual beliefs or whatever you believe is innately wrong. Like, harming another human being is innately wrong. We don't do it ever at our household. But for them to understand that it's not mom's rules that I'm breaking and I want to rebel. It's the universe's rules. This is truth, absolute truth. So I actually made a video about that that I'm going to post on Instagram this week. But it's just a really interesting paradigm shift to go from it being mom's rules to absolute rules that apply to everybody.
Yeah, I like that. I have a verse that I'll often have my kids copy when they're not, for copy work at school, when they're not getting along. And it's in Ecclesiastes 4, and it says, 2 are better than 1, and a threefold cord is not soon broken. So just getting them to thinking that this information that mom has given us is coming from somewhere outside of mom.
Because when they get mad at you, they might, try to break all your rules. But if it's a higher power that's holding them accountable, that's different.
Yeah.
And like we kind of mentioned before, it's fun for me to allow my kids to kind of innocently gang up on me, So like you say, sometimes that's forced, like making them do a chore together or making them do a project together. But sometimes it just kind of happens. And when they can kind of band together to do something that, I don't know, go make a big mud mess or something. It doesn't have to be something, it shouldn't be something bad, but what I mean is just something that they're doing together that mom isn't a part of. I think that's so valuable because, like, I love doing things all together as a family, but in the end, my kids, when they're 30, 40, 50, are probably not going to want to come hang out with me as much as they're going to want to go hang out with their siblings and each other's kids, right? So to have those relationships early on is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that now in my teenagers. They're to the place where they have, stuff that they talk about. Oh, I don't know. Like they talk about things on forms of social media that don't even have TikTok or whatever, and they laugh and giggle about something they saw or something they heard or something. And I was like, I'm glad you guys are enjoying each other because that's going totally over my head. And that's part of the joy for them is that mom and dad are old fuddy-duddies and they have no clue what, TikTok is or whatever.
Yeah, totally. Fun quotes or expressions or things that band them together that mom has no clue about. Some stupid Fortnite dance or I don't know, whatever the kids are into these days. Along these lines, sleep is sharing a bedroom with a sibling can really help them that way, especially if the kids aren't getting along. Maybe say, we're going to have a couple of months where you guys get to share a room. See if you could work it out. Having like little secrets from mom, as long as they're innocent, obviously, girl talk, boy talk, whatever. And then lastly, my tip is to be really cautious about labeling kids. And you kind of mentioned this, when a sibling comes around, like, it's not that you're not the baby anymore. You're still as valuable, et cetera. But pointing out when one kid is good at something can automatically make the other kid assume that they're not and that there's some sort of competition. And we often do this subconsciously. So I remember hearing a talk in church, I think a while ago, where the speaker said, if you say Susan is pretty and Jane is smart, the only thing Susan is going to hear is that she's not smart and Jane will hear she's not pretty. I thought, which is so true. We're trying to find like something to build someone up with. But oftentimes if we do that individually that's totally fine to do one-on-one. But if we do that within the earshot of someone else, they are naturally going to compare themselves and say, gee, mom's never told me I'm smart, and that might seem silly, but it really can affect the kid. And to dole out those compliments generously and across the board. And if you want to say something personal to a child, to do it out of earshot of other people. So
Sure. I've even heard adults say things like, I can't paint because my sister was the painter.
Yeah, that's sticks with you for a long time.
That doesn't make you not a painter.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree about kids sleeping together. As I've mentioned before, we have a very small house, and all the girls sleep in one room and all the boys, except the baby and the biggest college boy, sleep in another room. And, it really does something for their psychology. When you have to sleep together at the end of the day in the same bed or in the same room, you kind of don't want to make too huge of an enemy of that person. It's kind
of the reason they say that spouses should always go to bed together, right? So that you can come together and the day on a positive note.
Bonnie, now we're going to get people requesting us to talk about our marriage relationships and so on. Don't. Okay. All right. So what to do when they don't get along? Because there are times when there will be two kids of a certain age, and they hit that age, and they're just, no matter what, they're just always fighting, no matter. So sometimes separating them works. When they're younger, especially, this works. Sometimes just, okay, you go on the second floor of the house and you go down on the first floor of the house, and you guys aren't allowed on the same floor. And then, of course, all they can think of is, I want my whatever from my room upstairs. And the other one's like, but I just wanted to, whatever downstairs. And then, no, sorry, you weren't getting along. And so for an hour, you have to be on separate floors of the house. And then they're like, oh, well, yeah, because it's that way naturally. When you can't have something that's the only thing you want.
It's a good way for them to quickly get over their frustration, because they really want to reunite and get the thing they need.
Yeah. And then, but when they get older, I find making them work together is better. Like if I say 5 and under, it's different for every kid. But if I separate them when they're 5 and under, that works. If I make them work together when they're 5 and under, they just won't work. Right. They'll just sit there and fight. Yeah. But if they're older and having to work together toward a common goal on a common task, and I'm not afraid to, make them dig a hole and fill it back up again, just to be working together. But around here, there's plenty of work to do, clean out the goat shed or, weed the garden or whatever. And having to work together, hard physical labor, it really kind of takes some of the vim and vinegar out of them.
Even if they get distracted and just end up playing, you still win.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and then as parents realize it's something they're going to outgrow. If we keep the major resentment from allowing sibling rivalry and encouraging competition, and if we are just, on a mission not to let that happen in our family, then these squabbles, these petty squabbles, are kind of an age-related thing, and they will outgrow it, and they'll get along better when they're adults. Just because that's the way it works.
Yeah, true. And along these lines, this goes, those labels also apply to sibling rivalry. Like if we start saying, well, Johnny and Sarah never get along. They just are always competitive and they just don't like each other. That sticks. And I found myself doing the same thing. Oh, those two are always like, oil and vinegar, those two, they can't mix, blah, blah, blah. And I realized that I'm harming my children because I'm not allowing them the opportunity to get over it, which I know they will someday, because I just keep bringing it up.
Yeah. So another effective thing that I do is take away the thing they're fighting over. Usually it's a toy or a book, or sometimes when it's just two going at loggerheads over anything, just take away like 10 items during the day. Okay, you're fighting over that. I don't like fighting in my house. That goes away. And this almost ended up as my humor segment. There's a legend in my husband's family that he and his sister were fighting over a book, and the dad said, "Hey, let me see that." And they're like, "Okay, Dad." And they handed him the book, and he opened the fireplace and chucked it in, slammed the door, and they got the message. Yeah.
Next time it's going to be one of you.
Yeah. But they got the message. And, you know, when you take away the thing they're fighting over, that usually takes some of the steam out of their sails. They're like, okay. And then, you know, then if it happens a couple times, okay, so you take away 2 or 3 things they're fighting over, and pretty soon one of them will get it, and they'll be like, you can just have that. Let's not fight over this because Mom's going to take it away too, you know? I have no problem with enforced physical contact for when they're fighting. So 2 kids that are made to sit next to each other on the couch, touching, holding hands, sitting cross-legged, face-to-face, whatever, enforced physical contact. In about 30 seconds, they'll be laughing instead of fighting. I don't know why, but if you just make them sit there and hold hands and look at each other, put their arms around each other, give them a kiss, tell them they're sorry, give each other a kiss, say, I'm sorry, say, I accept your apology. It's something about the physical touching, and they'll turn, you know, if I say, okay, you guys have to sit there on the couch holding hands until you're friends, in about, you know, 30 seconds, they'll be laughing and joking and hugging each other, and they may not be friends, but at least they're not fighting.
I have a couple
anymore.
questions about that, because I've wanted to do that multiple times, but just keep forgetting. So you do this have you done this with all ages? Are there specific ages it works better with?
You usually don't have to do it anymore after they're
okay, 8, so mostly 10. Little kids. Okay. And if they're already physically fighting, does this work as well? Or do they just, because that would be my concern, is like, all right, sit on the couch next to each other, and they just keep slugging each other. Or maybe that's just my kids.
I don't know. My kids have never done that.
Okay.
Now I do have to say that with boys, I accept a little more rough and tumble. And I know we have scheduled to do an episode on raising boys versus raising girls, but I do allow some of the physical rough and tumble, as long as I see that nobody's getting mad. And usually I'll just say, hey, I don't want any holes kicked in my walls. Take it outside. If you're going to wrestle with each other, go do that outside. You know, go play your whatever, wrestling, karate, boxing, whatever you're doing, go take it outside. It's not that I don't want him to be physical and be boy. It's just I don't want holes kicked in my wall.
Well, and my younger boy, things often start off like that, but because he doesn't have any brothers close to him in age, then someone ends up getting hurt because the girls don't tolerate quite as much, you know, like you rough housing or whatever. So then somebody cries. So then it's a fight. And I'm like, I think I still need to separate you because you're kind of being physical and nobody likes it right now. But interesting.
Yeah. Well, just use your mother's intuition and know what it's appropriate to do at that time. Do these guys need to be separated until they cool down and then they sit on the couch holding hands until they're friends? Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah. Okay. And then I've also given my kids a job or the chore or the task of making their sibling happy for a day. So if there's 2 that have been fighting, I'll say, okay, you guys sit them down in the morning, and they come up first thing. Say, okay, you guys spent a lot of your day fighting, and that's not our vision for this family. That's not what we want for the future. So today, you guys' job is to make each other happy all day long. And you have to think about, instead of what do I want to eat, what would my sibling want to eat? What would make them happy to eat? And if you want a toy to play, what toy would make my sibling happy? And if you want, something, a book to read, what story would my sibling like to read or have read to them? And your job today is to make your sibling happy. And again, this just gets them out of their own head and thinking about somebody else. So that's been a pretty effective tool to kind of break up the ongoing prolonged rivalry between 2 kids.
You know, when that's really worked for us is usually around Christmas time, we'll do like the Secret Santa type thing. And everyone is so sweet to each other for the week or 2 that we do it, because they're always on alert trying to see what that person's interested in, what they're struggling with, something they forget, a chore they forget to do that they could then sneak in and do for them. So I need to remember that other times of the year too, when they're feeling less of the Christmas spirit. That's great. Like we've been stuck in the house in the middle of summer or something. So I love that. So I'm going to offer a couple of tips of what to do when your kids don't get along as well. But I just want to preface this by saying it can be difficult to have the right balance between interfering and letting kids work out their own thing, right? So like when I was in my early mothering years, I felt like I intervened all the time. I was like, oh, don't do that. Oh, don't do that. Oh, let's not do that, and now I've chilled out a little bit and also gotten a little bit lazy. So now I find myself watching passively as kids fight, thinking, to get off the couch or not to get off the couch. So I really do think that that's a challenge to give your kids a little bit of space to work things out on their own without allowing like real harm to come to each other just because you're getting lazy or you don't know what to do. Right. So I will just mention that I do have an adult family member who for many years harbored some serious resentment towards a sibling because growing up, this person's parents did not do very much to separate those two and to stop the fighting. And there was some serious harm done both emotionally and physically between those two. And I just thought, oh, I can't let that happen in my house. So just to be aware of what's happening and that if any of these rivalries start to, last more than a couple of days or a couple of months, to really try to focus on it and work that out so that there's not lasting damage done.
Yeah, that's a good point. I totally agree with that.
Okay, so like you said, doing some service for a child is really, really helpful. And sometimes the whole family can do it, like if one kid's having a hard time and it's just causing fights with everyone, to just kind of gather around with everybody else and say, hey, let's all do one nice thing for Juliet today. She's having a hard day. And everybody can go out. Instead of everyone getting irritated at that person for having a short temper, we can all go out of our way to serve them. So I like that idea too. We can talk. Yeah. You heard the saying, to correct in private, but to praise in public. So that can be really helpful when siblings are squabbling too, that when there is something that one person is doing wrong, to pull that person off aside and say, hey, I've noticed that you've been having a hard time with this. Can I help you out? And then when they do something right, to do that, to say that in front of the other siblings. So what that does is doesn't, demean a child in front of everyone else. So everyone knows that kid is being naughty today, but everyone is more likely to praise another person because mom's doing it in public. So anyway, that's just kind of a thought, especially when one kid especially is having a trouble.
Yeah, that reminds me of the way that Jo in Little Men would handle all her boys that she was raising.
It's been a long time.
Little Men, Lewis May Alcott. Yeah, she had like a notebook, and she would have a weekly session with each boy with the notebook every week. And they would talk about, what they were struggling with and how they were improving and little things that she'd noticed about them that were awesome. And like, she would just write it down and then she could remember and talk to each boy each week.
Really
I just
cool.
thought of that.
Really, really cool. I like that. And then the final thing I want to mention is I said earlier that I've been especially focusing as a parent lately on finding the good in my kids. And I got this, it's not a new concept, obviously. I'm often thinking about this, but recently a fellow homeschool mom brought this to my attention and had a specific term for it. She calls it energizing greatness, which I really, really liked. So instead of energizing the negativity that's happening around your home, but to instead energize the greatness. And so what that means is changing your perspective a little bit. I think as a parent, you're used to, especially as an overwhelmed parent, which I think I am, you're used to, you're on high alert when problems are happening, right? In order to stop someone from hurting someone else or stop them from damaging something in the house. But instead to be on high alert when you're seeing good happen. And sometimes that can be really tricky, especially for the younger ones that don't really go out of their way to do nice things to each other. But you can, even something as simple as, I'm so happy you dropped the pot lid instead of chucking it at your sister. That was such a good thing to do, right? Like, sounds kind of inane, but it really was a hard thing for him to do. Like, that was a struggle. He wanted to throw it and he didn't.
Yeah.
To start very small in praising those great things for them that might seem small to us, but really are a great thing for a 6 or 7-year-old to do. And within that, to appreciate your kids' love for each other. Like, wow, I just love how you guys played together so sweetly all morning long. That was so nice. I was able to take care of the baby and do the dishes. Thank you. And whereas any other day you might just think, yeah, they're playing great. Finally, I get some peace and quiet, but to share that with them.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that. I definitely notice if I get negative with a kid, that kid gets more negative. It's like a downward spiral. But yeah, you're right. I like that term, energizing greatness. You can like plant the seed of positivity, and they then that can keep going because every kid likes to hear good things about themselves.
Another idea that my friend does is she actually has a couple of chalkboards up in a room where kids can write down great things that they've seen their siblings do. So it's not just up to her to find it, but someone can walk by and say, oh, so-and-so helped me find my shoe this morning when I was running late for something. Or so-and-so, lent me his toy when I couldn't find mine. I just love that idea because then kids can constantly be thinking of, looking for the good as well, just like you are.
Yeah. 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 That's awesome. I did have one final tip come to mind for when you get a couple of siblings that are just they can't seem to get along. It's like you almost wonder if it's their personalities that are just not suited for each other and if they're ever going to get along. I have encouraged both of them, like privately away from the other one, just sit down and have a little discussion and say, I notice you really have a hard time getting along with your younger brother or your older sister or whatever. And I was just wondering, do you pray for your sibling?
Oh, I love that.
So again, kind of bumping them out of their own mind and into a higher spiritual mind to think about, what do other people think about this sibling? What does God think about my sibling? Or, how am I responsible for, my brother's keeper and all that? So that is one final tip. If you've got these long lasting rivalries and you're just kind of wondering if it's ever going to stop, that is something that I have encouraged my kids to, take it to a higher power and ask for help.
Yes, I love that idea. And it's so easy to overlook. We personally, I'm sure every parent who believes in God prays for their kids, but to ask your kids to do the same for each other can really help them elevate themselves out of that sphere of she is so annoying to, wow, she really does have great qualities, and to start to see those goods because they are able to see them through God's eyes. I love that.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a book to recommend. It's called Siblings Without Rivalry, and it's written by the same people that wrote How to Talk So Your Kids Will Listen and Listen So Your Kids Will Talk. And I read these two books way back at the beginning of my parenting career, so they are outdated. There's probably newer, shinier versions, but I don't think the things that are said in them have gone out of date. So Siblings Without Rivalry is how to talk to your kids in front of the other kids and how to talk to them, when they're by themselves, and to help offload.
Oh, I love that.
Offset. How to, offset some of that rivalry before it even starts, just by the words that you're using and the communication that you're having in front of your kids.
Oh, yeah, I love that. I'm going to have to check those out.
So that's all we have for you today on Sibling Rivalry. We hope that something we have said has struck a chord with you, maybe a little tip you can try, or at the very least, just know that at least you don't have 9 kids fighting with each other.
Life could always be worse. Or maybe you do. You know exactly where we're at. Good for you.
Thanks so much for chatting with us about this topic today.
That's funny.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd be so grateful if you'd leave us a written review on iTunes.
If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, you can reach us at outnumberedthepodcast@gmail.com and find us on Instagram at outnumberedthepodcast.
See you next week. Yeah. Okay, so, hey, Bonnie, did you have dad's story in parentheses? Did you cover that? Or is that something different?
I was thinking about that. I think I'll tell you that off air because that might incriminate my dad. He might not like that. So just keep going. It's fine.
Oh. Okay.